This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we have major breaking news here. It looks like the FBI has sided with John Cornyn in his effort to get the FBI to go and retrieve these Texas Democrats who are right now breaking quorum in Chicago, Illinois. So first and foremost, you and I have spoken about the legality of this move. Obviously, it's not legal to weaponize the DOJ to do the political bidding of these politicians. And so how do you deal with the disparity between the fact that A, it's not illegal, but B, it's happening anyway?
Right. So look, I said in no uncertain terms that the FBI is not going to be able to retrieve these people, and I stand by that. Okay. That remains my position, and you will now all have it on two videos. You can go watch the last one where I said it, and this one you can bookmark as well. It is one thing for Kash Patel to go along with this charade that John Cornyn set up because he is running for Senate against Ken Paxton. So he needed to come up with some cockamamie bullshit thing that makes it seem like he's, upping the ante. It's one thing for Kash Patel to say, fine, like, yes, I got your letter, and, we'll do. We're gonna help track these people down. It is another thing, though, for the FBI to actually take affirmative steps to essentially kidnap these people or somehow arrest them for what I don't know, and drag them out of the state of Illinois back to Texas. The governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, has already said that, this won't happen on his watch, and I believe him. He's one of the big fighters for democracy right now. Mm-hmm. But there's also just like the practical reality, which is that these FBI agents, joined the Bureau to investigate crimes. And there just isn't a basis and a way in which they're going to get Chicago FBI agents to go find these people and then somehow literally throw them in the back of a van. Now I realize you're going to say, yes, Mark, that's exactly what this government does. But throw them in the back of a van and drive them to Texas. I mean, I think that is, my bet is still against that happening. I think that what Kash Patel will probably announce in the coming days is we have found them. You asked us to go find them. We have found them. Now, of course, we all know where they are because they're
right. We've also found them because they've come forward and said they're in Chicago. So
right.
Well, to that point, and I know that the lines have been blurred here because we have watched ICE agents across the country need no pretext of a crime to be able to throw people in the back of a van and just drive off with them. So we have kind of seen state-sanctioned kidnapping occur. But in a normal world, does there need to be some rationale, some legal rationale for the FBI to be able to touch anybody? Because the reality is that these Texas legislators have not committed a crime. They're making use of a tool to bring about some political end, right? Like quorum breaks are a tool that's been used since the 1800s. It's not a crime to be able to do that. And in fact, there are fines put in place which kind of legitimizes the use of quorum breaking as a tool, but it's not illegal. And so does the FBI need some type of actual crime to be able to put their hands on anybody?
So, I mean, there are several layers of the reason why this would be completely, crazily out of bounds. The first, as you say, there's no crime. The second is, even if there were a crime, it would be a state crime. The FBI is not like the roving enforcer of state laws. Yeah. That isn't the FBI investigates federal crimes. That's what the FBI does. It's part of the Federal Department of Justice. Yeah. It is not like if you are, the Utah Attorney General and you are we have a shoplifter who is, violated Utah's anti-shoplifting statute. They don't get to call the FBI and be like, hey, go start a manhunt, around the country for our shoplifter. That just isn't the role of the FBI. It's not within the jurisdiction of the FBI. So even, Brian, if there were a crime in Texas, let's say there was a warrant, or an indictment handed up by a grand jury in Texas state court, the FBI still wouldn't have a role here because this is a state offense. This is not a federal offense. At that point, what would happen is the state of Texas would reach out to their counterparts in Illinois and say, hey, we've arrested someone. We have a valid warrant. We need you to enforce it. It's sometimes referred to as domesticating it, to bring it from one state to the other. I don't know what would happen in that case here. Normally, states cooperate with each other. There are a lot of reasons why they do. In this instance, perhaps the governor of Illinois or the AG of Illinois wouldn't, but that would be like a abnormal normal dispute. The idea that somehow the FBI, that Kash Patel is involved in this, it is both illustrative of how absolutely batshit crazy the Republican Party has become, how absolutely lazy the legacy media has become, and how completely insane Republicans in Texas are. That John Cornyn thinks that the way he can help win his Senate primary against Ken Paxton is to say, well, all Ken Paxton tried to do is strip these people of their seats by going to the courts and saying that they've been
Right,
vacant.
I'm going to have them kidnapped.
I was tougher than that.
I'm going to have them kidnapped by the FBI.
I was for kidnapping.
Yeah. I think it's clear that Kash Patel is not above doing something just because it's out of bounds or outside of his jurisdiction or even illegal as it relates to the FBI. And so in the event that the FBI actually does go to Chicago and like he finds some people willing to drive up in a van and scoop these people up, what are we looking at then? What kind of recourse do they have? I mean, how do you fight against a federal government? Like, this is the federal government. The executive branch is supposed to be upholding the laws. What happens when they're the ones breaking them?
Yeah, so it's a fair question because, look, if you had asked me 6 months ago, and as you know, I've been among the most cynical about the Trump administration. I've been among the people sounding the loudest alarm bells that the Trump administration will do just about anything to stay in power, that they won't pay attention to the law. So it's a fair point that you make that we should not discount the absolutely impossible. And if you'd asked me a few months ago whether I thought that they would body slam, a U.S. senator to the ground for trying to ask a question of the Secretary of Homeland Security when she gave a press conference in her state, I would have said no. If you had asked me, would they be indicting Democratic members of Congress for trying to visit ICE facilities in New Jersey, I would have said no. So let's play this through on the terms in which you said. So if they grabbed these folks, the first thing that would happen is someone would, on their behalf, would run to federal court and file a petition for a writ of habeas corpus, which basically is what happens when you believe that the federal government is wrongly detaining someone. So a writ of habeas corpus is literally asking a federal judge to force the government to produce the person, the body, and if you translate from the Latin, the person themselves to the court. Like, bring this person to my courtroom and explain to me why you are holding them. And like the FBI could try to beat themselves, beat the clock by getting outside the state of Illinois before that writ could be filed and executed. And again, I'm not discounting that as a possibility. We actually saw that in some of the detention cases where where ICE was clearly trying to get these people out of places like Massachusetts and Vermont and get them into Louisiana because they thought it would be a harder place to file a habeas petition in the Fifth Circuit than in those places. So that would be the first thing that would happen. The second thing that would be happen if that failed is that they would be presumably returned to the state of Texas and then released, right? They'd be released. Like, the FBI will have kidnapped them to return them to the state of Texas, but then what?
We've seen instances where, to relate this to ICE, where these ICE officers are waiting in the courtrooms for these immigrants who are going to their hearings, their regularly scheduled hearings. I mean, wouldn't it be the same thing where we already have these warrants out in Texas, and these Texas officials have put out the orders for, I believe it's like some iteration of the sergeant or DPS, where DPS was told to go after these Texas officials, but they can only do that where they have jurisdiction, which is to say in Texas. And so if the FBI grabs these people out of Illinois and just drops them off in Texas, then they can release them from their custody, and they don't even have to go to these Texas officials. These Texas Democrats don't even have to go to court and for a writ of habeas corpus. They can just get released immediately, and the FBI can say we're done. But then there's going to be DPS officials waiting to pick them up. Do you think that strategy carries any water?
But the whole theory of what the Republicans are trying to do is to force these Democrats to attend a legislative session. Like, I feel like the Republicans have lost the plot. On the one hand,
Yeah.
what they claim to want is that these Democrats stop breaking quorum. To stop breaking quorum, it requires them to be in the legislature. If you arrest them, they are not in the
Yeah.
legislature. Like, there's still no
Yeah.
quorum. They still can't pass their redistricting map. So, like, it feels like there is a bizarro land quality to this whole thing, because the reason why the speaker, the Republican speaker of the state house wants, is for the local police or the state police to get these officials and bring them to the
Right.
Capitol, not to arrest them, but to bring them to the Capitol. I mean, it's an arrest of sorts, right? It's physical, taking possession, bringing them to the Capitol to make them be in this hearing. And in the meantime, you still have the governor, Greg Abbott, and you still have Ken Paxton, the attorney general, squabbling with each other over who gets to sue, right? That's still going
Yeah.
on. But they both want the court to declare these seats vacant. And so that then these members are no longer members of the legislature, at which point, like, why wouldn't you just leave them in Illinois, right? Because at that point, you don't even need them to, like,
Right.
you don't want them back because they don't actually have a seat in the legislature. So what you have is a Republican Party in disarray in Texas. They are all working at sort of different theories, at cross purposes in some instances, because they are all trying to claim the limelight for their cockamamie
Yeah.
idea. But as you said, breaking quorum is not an unprecedented thing in this country. It's not an unprecedented thing, not only in Texas, not an unprecedented thing in other legislative bodies in the country. And so, in some ways, we are allowing ourselves to offer a legitimacy to these desperate measures that Texas Republicans are under, because we think that maybe they're being super smart. They're not being super smart. They're being desperate. They're being disorganized, and they are being authoritarian. And I grant you that last part, with it comes a lot of risk, because that could then spiral out in a lot of bad ways. And we've seen that when you are desperate and you are an authoritarian, you're trying to show force, innocent people can get harmed. And so I take that seriously. But I think everyone needs to stay grounded and realize that if the FBI did what you are worried about, that, frankly, I'm worried about,
Yeah.
that John Cornyn wants, we would have a constitutional crisis of a different magnitude and a different order. The question would be, is the Federal Bureau of Investigations engaged in the kidnapping of legislators? I mean, like, that, where does that end, Brian?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, you have been a leader in terms of being outspoken about these risks, as you mentioned, from the very beginning up until right now. So highly recommend for anybody who's watching right now, please elevate Mark's voice in this ecosystem. Subscribe to his YouTube channel, Democracy Docket. I'm going to put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe, but it's a great way to support his work and get his voice in front of as many people as possible, especially folks who are just coming into this YouTube ecosystem for the first time. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.